Hi everyone, this is Grandmaster Eugene Perelshteyn with chess.com, and I'm doing part 2 of the Scandinavian defense for black. So after e4, d5, e takes d, queen takes d5, knight c3, I mentioned that I also did a series on the move queen d6. But here I'm focusing on the most popular move, queen a5, of the Scandinavian, and now d4. So let me quickly review what I covered in part 1. This is d4 is the main move. White develops pretty naturally and grabs the center. Knight f6, knight f3, c6. Remember, black's plan is to build the pawn structure b7, c6, f7, e6. The problem, though, you have to get your bishop out before that. Just like in the similar opening, the Qa5 defense, the bishop gets out before you play e6. Bishop c4, bishop f5. And now in the first lecture, I covered this move bishop d2. This is a quiet looking move which sets up this discovery knight d5. Typically the knight on c3 is not doing so well. C2 and d4 pawns ideally want to get connected. And after e6, knight d5, queen d8, knight takes, I recommended pawn takes knight. So we covered the moves c3, bishop b3, both with idea knight h4. We covered the move castle, which results in some nice tactical ideas. So a lot of interesting lines result from this. Knight takes f6, pawn takes f6. It's very important that you keep that bishop on f5 locked on g6 once you get attacked. You don't really want to get knight on h4, take the bishop on f5 and ruin your pawn structure. Also, it's important to keep an eye on the g-file. In general, black's position is super solid and a lot of tactical possibilities can arise. Now, besides the move knight d5, white doesn't have to play it right away. White can simply try to finish his development. And let's take a look what happens after queen e2. Well, after queen e2, black has a no-brainer move, bishop b4. Now we prevent any type of discovery, and white simply completes his development with castle. So knight bd7, black is getting ready to castle as well. And now a3, forcing us to take the knight on c3 and give up the bishop pair. Bishop takes c3, hitting the queen. So now simply queen c7. And this is a very typical position of the Scandinavian. Black has a perfect pawn structure for this opening. The bishop is out, although white has some trumps. White has some space advantage, the outpost for the knight on e5, and the bishop pair. Well, the problem with the bishop pair is that the bishop on c3 looks at his own pawns on b2 and d4 and does absolutely nothing there. It's pretty much impossible for white to ever play d5. The bishop on c4 is looking at super solid f7, e6 pawns and pretty much does nothing too. So it's not easy to take advantage of the bishop pair. So knight e5 makes sense. Try to occupy the outpost. And with this following simple exchange and putting his knight on d5, black secures a good opening. Again, knight takes c3 is a threat. If white tries to prevent black from castling by taking here and playing bishop b4, of course now you can never castle. But there is no worries because you have the half-open c-file, the king is the target, rook d2 preventing queen takes c2. And now with this nice idea queen c4 threatening to play queen a2 and queen a1 mate, well, white really has nothing better than to exchange, and now we have ourselves totally fine position for black. Black can end up playing king d7, rook c8, and have a nice pressure on the c-file. Probably it's about equal, but I would think it's easier to play as black. So this is one possibility. Another possibility, of course, is for white to retain his bishop pair with this move bishop d2. Well, this gives black a nice little breather to castle. And now black has a beautiful position for the knight on d5. If you don't take the knight, you have to cope with it. If you do take the knight, then black will recapture probably with the rook now, double up on the d file, and again have a beautiful game. If white tries to harass the bishop with the moves such as g4 and h4, we are always ready to meet it with the move h5. And again, there is really no way for white to do any damage here. Also, black can try to play h6, which is a little bit quieter move. Either way, black secures himself this beautiful diagonal for the bishop. If white tries to play f4 move, then black immediately undermines white's pawn structure on the king side with the move h5. And again, black is going to have a lot of counterplay on the h file. Later on, black can activate his queen b6, queen c5, eyeing that pawn on c2. And in general, black has enough play to guarantee him a good game. So this is if white plays quiet move, go back, queen e2 rather than knight d5. Then we play bishop b4, knight d7, simply castle long, very easy game. Now, there are other sidelines as well. One of them we have to worry about is the move knight e5. This is kind of hyper-aggressive move, trying to aim for the weak f7 pawn. Unfortunately for white, this doesn't quite work. Black has a very simple defense, e6, forever blocking this bishop from doing any damage. And now white continues his hyper-aggressiveness with this g4. Remember, white hasn't even castled yet, and yet he's extending his kingside pawns all the way. Let's see if it accomplishes anything. Bishop g6, h4, about to play h5. Well, thankfully, we have another square for the bishop, for the g6 bishop, so black absolutely has no worry at all. Knight b7, h5, and now bishop e4. If knight takes on d7, h5, same thing, bishop e4. We have an outpost on d5 for our bishop, and it's really hard for white to do anything at all to get rid of it. If white plays f3, bishop d5, followed by bishop d6, this king is really weakened. Black has a very fluid pawn structure, no weaknesses, no bad pieces whatsoever, and has a very nice position. So I like black here. So once again, the sidelines are nothing to be worried about, and black is doing great in all of them. However, there is one variation that black really has to worry about. It's this move knight e5 right away. So without playing bishop c4, white immediately tries to seize that outpost, and notice that if you play bishop f5 now, it's the same except that the bishop is not on c4 and white can play knight c4 hitting the queen. Later on, queen f3 hit the bishop, etc., etc. Bishop f5 is not the best move. I like bishop e6. Bishop e6 is one of those moves that only works if white plays knight e5. Because normally you wouldn't want to block your own pawn on e7, would you? But since white wasted a tempo, bishop e6 is not actually wasting a tempo. Rather, it's a prophylactic move and preparing knight bd7. So here white has two popular ways. One way is to follow up with knight c4 to harass the queen even more. And black, the reason behind bishop e6 is that we can always take that knight. That's what black does. And just like in the earlier line where we gave up the dark square bishop for knight on c3, giving up the light square bishop for knight on c4, black is doing just fine. After castle, black's plan is super straightforward. Bishop d6, knight b7, castle short. Again, black has no weaknesses. Black has a great position for his pieces, and later on, black can try to bound the attack with the rook d8 against the d4 pawn and try to undermine it with the move such as c5. Black also has a nice outpost for the knight on d5. In general, it's really hard for white to prove that his advantage of two bishops is really anything at all. There is another, though, move here for white, is bishop c4. That's a little bit more annoying. Why? Well, if now you exchange, you get hit with the knight. If you go back, you're going to get hit with the bishop. Just get annoying no matter what. So bishop c4 is a possibility. But here I want to introduce a rare move that's only been played a few times, is this move knight bd7. Black is willingly letting his bishop to be captured on e6. Of course, taken with the pawn is suicidal. This is ruining your pawn structure so bad. But there is a little nice intermezzo. Knight takes knight. And it turns out that if pawn takes knight, queen takes, pawn check, this bishop is lost and black won a pawn in the process. So white has nothing better but to retreat, or maybe play queen e2. But let's take a look at bishop b3, for instance. So now knight g6, white castles e6. Just like in the previous line, remember where bishop from e6 to the knight on c4, this is same exact pawn structure, except the knight is on g6 rather than on d7. Not much has changed, really. So this is totally fine for black. What other moves are there? Well, there has been, of course, there's not too many games yet, so there's a lot of uncharted territory here, but this move has been played. And after knight g6, bishop b3, e6, bishop d2. Idea again, trying to get some kind of discovery on the queen, bishop b4, castle, castle, and now queen c4. Again, here it's totally fine to give up the bishop pair immediately. Bishop can take and run into some problem on queen g5. So white in the game took with the queen. Queen takes, bishop takes. And here black has a very nice maneuver, which I think is very instructive to neutralize this bishop pair. If somehow white can build up his position to get the pawn to c4 and maybe even expand with the move g3, f4 and try to push the knights back, white will have real advantage. Two bishops in an open position is a pretty strong trump. But here is a very good instructive example. Knight h4, hitting the pawn. So rook hg1, for instance. And now knight f5, exclam. Notice this very instructive rerouting of the knight. It turns out that f5 is one of the best squares for the knights. Now this bishop on c3 is really pinned down defending the pawn on d4. Furthermore, the knight from f6 can jump to e4 and harass it even further. Later on, we can double up on the d file. This bishop on b3 does absolutely nothing. And in general, this position is totally fine for black. Probably with best play, it's about even, but black has clear targets, whereas white's bishops are not doing so hot. So let's go back. And take a look at this line one more time. So this move, knight e5, is played immediately without even bringing the bishop out. And I prefer this unorthodox solution with bishop e6, I in the c4 square, preparing knight bd7. By the way, if white never gets to play bishop c4, knight c4, if you're ever worried about how to bring out this bishop, there is a very simple solution, g6, bishop g7. Fianchettoing this bishop is not a bad idea. It has been played many times, especially with the bishop being on e6. So if white plays knight c4, we get ourselves this typical position of the Scandinavian. Black's plan is bishop d6, knight bd7, castle. If white plays bishop c4, again, knight bd7, and after bishop takes, knight takes, bishop retreats, knight g6, we get ourselves exactly the same type of pawn structure, with black's light square bishop being exchanged for the knight. And again, bishop can simply go to d6. And if you're actually one of those aggressive players, you might even consider castling long. Castling short is just a safe way to play it. But there's all these possibilities, especially now that the knight can participate in the attack, potentially knight h4. And finally, if white plays queen e2 and tries to go long after e6, bishop b2, bishop b4, castle, castle, then this trade of the queen favors black, and now we have our little knight h4, knight f5 idea. So in general, these sidelines that I mentioned are not dangerous, and if black is a prepared player, he knows what to do. So in part 1, we covered the main line where white plays bishop d2, knight d5, hitting the queen, followed by knight f6, g takes f. In part 2, we covered queen e2, castle idea, and then sidelines with knight e5, with the bishop c4 or without the bishop c4 move order. In part 3, I want to cover all the other sidelines where white chooses a totally different plan, and yet black needs to be prepared, because you never know what kind of threats white can cook up his sleeve. Thank you so much, and this is Eugene Perelshteyn, together with chess.com, Scandinavian Defense Part 2.